What is the cost of perfectionism?
Because I didn't even acknowledge that I really had anxiety to a level that I did, I was completely unaware of the toll that I guess it was taking. Dentistry is stressful. We're providing this very high skill on a moving target, in a small mouth, and our scale of success and failure is a millimeter. Of course, why do you think we have a high suicide rate? You just get on with it, just look forward to retirement. And I'm like, okay, like, this is just the way it is. And nobody was talking about stress and or anxiety. And those words were just taboo. Like,
Yeah.
I did not want to be associated with the anxious dentist.
Enough. Like you have to be this perfect professional with no emotions, you're not impacted by life.
Like, what about this? What was stopping me from sharing my journey? And when I did, people were crying. Like, dentists who were listening to me were crying. And I shared my journey with vulnerability. And so how do I use mindfulness? So the first step was,
I just want to quickly thank you for beginning to watch this podcast episode. If you haven't subscribed yet, feel free to do so. Would love it if you join our community. You'll also be up to date on the latest content, and this really helps me reach out to more guests. You can also visit our website, centerformindfulness.ca. There's free events about mindfulness and laughter. Hope you enjoy this episode. I am so excited to share with you today's conversation with a mindful dentist, Dr. Safa. First, a warm welcome to you.
Thank you so much, Kasim.
Thank you so much for joining us. So I'm excited because we'll be talking about stress, dentistry, mindfulness, perfectionism, and a range of topics that I know you'll find interesting. Dr. Safa is a board-certified periodontist, and I have to confess, I had to look up what that means to make sure I know the exact specialty. So I did look it up. So you're a dentist who specializes in the prevention, diagnosis, and treatment of periodontal disease, which is a chronic inflammatory disease that affects the gum and bones that support the teeth. And she also works in placement of dental implants. Dr. Safa is an alumna of the University of Toronto and an associate at the Faculty of Dentistry, where she lectures to graduate students. She also works in private practice in Toronto, where she enjoys all aspects of periodontal and implant-related patient care. She's a passionate advocate of wellness for dentists and dental students. Dr. Safa's master's research was in the field of psychoneuroimmunology, which is understanding the effects of stress on the body. This background, combined with her education in the field of mindfulness-based stress reduction, MBSR, has allowed her to share the science behind both stress and mindfulness, and how tools taught in MBSR can help reduce stress in our day-to-day lives. She has provided lectures and workshops to dental professionals nationally and internationally. So once again, thank you so much for joining us. There's so much to cover here. I wonder if we can begin, how did you even get interested in mindfulness? Dentist, specialist, busy life, family. How did you even get interested in mindfulness yourself?
Thanks, Kasim, for that introduction. And I'm really, truly honored to be here. I have to say, when I saw some of the other people that were featured on the podcast, I was initially intimidated, but then very honored actually to have and happy to share kind of what I'm doing in this space. How did I get here? So there's a short story and a long story. So I'll start with the short story, because it has a particular date and event with it that makes it quite memorable, not in a good way. So I had been a few years into my practice, and after graduating from school, like everybody, I kind of just fell into this thing that I had to have my own office. I had to get, that was going to be my path. And so I had two young children, married to another dental specialist, married to a dental specialist, an orthodontist, and who kind of knows the trials and tribulations of being a dentist. And my kids are young, and we move into this neighborhood, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm just going to set up a practice, really without ever thinking about it. I just knew that something that almost I had to do.
You're supposed to, in a way.
I was supposed to,
Yeah.
I was raised this way that, you're that, and then you're going to work and da, da, da. And since school had taken so long, it had taken about 11 years to get through this whole journey to become a periodontist, I kind of wanted to just get going. So a few years into my practice, I did notice some sort of some stressors creeping up. I always had some low-grade anxiety, but it was getting worse. I'd go to dental meetings and I would kind of say to colleagues, like, you guys stress, like dentistry's stressful. Like, and if people were like, oh yeah, well, Sally, dentistry's stressful, of course. Why do you think we have a high suicide rate? You just get on with it, just look forward to retirement. And I'm like, okay, like this is just the way it is. And nobody was talking about stress or anxiety. And those words were just taboo. Like,
Yeah.
I did not want to be associated with the anxious dentist. Like, I did not want, like, almost like
the stigma of like you have to be this perfect professional with no emotions, with you're not impacted by life. So,
yeah. Like I just I'm not. My patients might have that, but I don't have that. So no one was talking about it. No one talked to me about it in school. And so, years are passing and I'm like, this is getting harder, because my schedule's getting busier. And I got this reputation in my neighborhood for being the dentist that could handle a lot of anxious patients. So I was one of the first female periodontists to set up practice because it's one of the two dental surgical specialties, and not a lot of women go into the surgical specialties, and it was predominantly male dominated. That's changing, thank goodness.
Right. Yeah.
It was predominantly. So when I set up my practice, I was one of the first female periodontists, and I guess my bedside manner was a certain way that I started getting referred a lot of anxious patients, and the dentist would say to the patient, you're going to go see this dental specialist, and she's so good at managing people's anxieties, and she seems so whatever, and she'll do it all without sedating you. Like she's not very much about putting everybody to sleep, which was actually that was my belief. I was proud that I could provide this service and manage patients and get them through their anxious appointments without having to just put them to sleep. Oftentimes, my patients need multiple surgeries. So if I have to keep putting them to sleep, that's extra drugs in the system, need a ride home, it wipes them out for 2 days, versus when you come in and do a procedure and leave. So I have this way,
Wow. I'm curious. I'm sure you're going to go into it, but like, how did you do that? How did you not sedate people?
I didn't do it well. Like sedate, the patient will be anesthetized, so they don't have pain, but they're not put to sleep. Like I'm not actually giving them an IV to put them to sleep. So it would be like a regular dental appointment, but I'm doing gum surgery. And so why this is important is I actually didn't realize, I had no awareness at that point about the effects of an anxious patient on me. I didn't even acknowledge that I really had anxiety to a level that I did. I was completely unaware of the toll that I guess it was taking. This idea of, dentistry is stressful. We're providing this very this thing that we really trained to do that requires high skill on a moving target, in a small mouth, and our scale of success and failure is a millimeter.
Wow.
So most people,
precision.
most people got it my joke is if I ask a contractor or an arborist, like, can you cut that tree back a millimeter? Like, it's a joke. Like, no one works on that scale. It's the tip of a pencil. Like, but that's our margin. Like, if you're 2 millimeters away, my margin of error is tiny. So it's a stressful profession. And unlike, many other professions, when a patient comes to us, we need to start and stop. We need to start and finish a procedure. I can't just start drilling into your tooth and then say, Kasim, ran out of time.
Yeah, come back tomorrow.
See you tomorrow. Or when you go to your medical doctor and they're like, one visit, one question, this kind of thing. We can't do that. You have an abscess. We need to take the tooth out. And remember, we're on this schedule. And people somehow tolerate waiting for a medical doctor for 2 hours, but if the dentist is 10 minutes late, there's it's like
somehow it's different standards.
It's different. And it's tough because we are starting and finishing a procedure in that entire time. So all that to say, so the particular moment was that I'm in this procedure, and it's called a gum graft, and it's taking tissue from the roof of the mouth and transplanting it to a tooth that the gum has receded. So where this is a little challenging, there's a point at which when we go to the roof of the mouth to get this gum, patients tilt it back, and and we're taking this gum graft, and there's a little blood vessel on the roof of the mouth called the greater palatine artery, and it's very difficult to nick it, but based on patient anatomy, you could, and we're trained for that. We're trained to nick this thing. This is what we do immediately
to address it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I've done this before. So if we backtrack, the patient who's in my chair is a patient who's what we call like white knuckling it. So they're sort of, the knuckles are white. They're brown.
So kind of tension in the body.
Very tense. Yeah. Like, and I'm kind of doing my whole thing, like it'll just be in, like I'm using all my tools and calming the patient down and breathing, And he's very nervous, and he's nervous even before the procedure starts. And I'm kind of talking him through it. It's like, no, I want to do it. Okay, no problem. It was one of those freak days where I happened to actually nick this artery. And
what a moment. Yeah.
And what happens with this artery is it bleeds like a crazy bleeder. And I mean, blood will shoot out of your mouth.
Oh, wow.
So his mouth starts pooling with blood, like immediately. And
no stress at all.
Why is dentistry so stressful?
Yeah.
So this guy's mouth starts filling with blood, and I know what I have to do. Like, I got to get me these sutures, and I have to suture. But when this patient sees this moment of change in my behavior, and also tasting the blood, and seeing, she goes into panic.
Yeah.
There is nothing worse than a patient who goes into a panic, and I have to do something for them. So he starts panicking. He's like, oh my God. And I'm like, please stay still. I have to. And Kasim, I start shaking myself so bad. And a shaking dentist cannot work.
Oh, wow. Yeah. And it's so like precision and fine, like motor skills. Yeah. If hands are shaking, how to even hold a tool to perform any dental work. Yeah.
Little space. Like, I can't even hold my instrument. And I'm like, oh my God, am I having a heart attack? Like, in that moment, now I'm like,
wow,
what is this? And I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, oh my God, what's happening? So I'm trying, and I'm like, I say to my assistant, I'm like, I can't. I'm like, can you just put your finger on the roof of the mouth? And I run out of the room because I think I'm having a heart attack. Like, I'm like, what is this? Like, what's
sort of full-blown panic. Yeah.
I had never had a panic attack, so I didn't even know what was going on. So now I'm in my private office, shaking, crying, scared, hands shaking.
That's terrifying. Like,
my patient is in the chair, bleeding. My assistant's finger is going numb, trying to hold the roof of the mouth.
Oh, wow.
It was the most horrible thing that's ever happened to me in clinical practice. After that moment, I got through it. 10 minutes, my assistant's finger actually ceased. She couldn't bend it after for like 20 minutes. Because
she was really pressing hard, yeah.
Yeah, and she had to. And so I came back in. I told him he has to please stay calm because I have to do this. He calmed down enough in that episode. I finished what I had to do. And in that very moment after that procedure, I knew something had to change. Like, I was so terrified, and I was so shook and so scared that I actually didn't do that particular procedure for months.
Worse.
And so that was the moment that started my journey, really. Maybe by force then, because if it hadn't happened, I probably wouldn't have realized that something is wrong. And then it was very much something's wrong with me. I'm not cut out for this. I have no business doing surgery. No one else is talking about this.
It led to doubts. So it's led to a lot of doubts, even though what you experienced was it's actually a natural bodily reaction to very heightened stress. Like your body was just fight, flight, freeze mode, right? Like
all of it, yeah. So, so my sister-in-law is a social worker, and I happened to share this with her, and I said, like, I think I need help, but like
don't tell anyone.
Like, I don't want anyone to know, not my family. Like, I don't want to talk about this. Like the shame, like just nobody in our profession had ever said to me that there's this anxiety, or there may be like these mirror neurons where like,
if you see someone panic, you may like how does stampedes happen, right? Like one person freaks out and runs, and then everybody runs, and then like me panicking because my patient starts panicking, or his anxiety triggers me. And
so she said to me, why don't you see a cognitive behavioral therapist? I know someone, yes, CBT, and I know someone. So I show up to this lovely woman's office, and I'm like, yeah, hi, I'm a dentist, and I have like a little bit of anxiety when it comes to dentistry, and I'm just wondering like how many sessions to like get this all sorted.
Let's kind of, it's like, how do we fix this? Let's get it over with quickly. Show me the plan.
Yeah, show me the plan. Like, what's the treatment plan? Like A to Z, how many sessions? Like, so 8 years later, still the same person, still with the same person, I should say, but a completely different person, me. Like, I am not, I wouldn't even be able to recognize that me. I really wouldn't. And it saddens me that I lived so long like that, and went through all my schooling like that, but that there's also so many other dentists that are going through this every day. And so I decided to do the work for myself. So I in addition to doing CBT and doing the one-on-one work that revealed some other things about myself, I also started to look into retreats and going to places where I could do this for a little bit longer, dive deeper. I was listening to Tara Brach, like, there's that, probably people listening know her. And
mindfulness work,
right. So and I was, and then I went down to the Omega Institute, and that's where I met Lawrence and Malay Mayer, and Judson Brewer, and these folks who through their programs, I learned about mindfulness tools. I learned what MBSR is, and then I started to delve deeper and deeper. Reading Kabat-Zinn's book, and the same journey that many people have taken. And I was confiding in a friend of mine one day about this, just secretly, like to another dentist.
Yes.
Who led a group called Women in Dentistry, I was a part of I was on the board of this group, and I would speak about gum issues to this group. Like I was kind of a gum specialist on this, and I would lecture, and and she says to me one day, how about the next talk you do, you share this? And I was like, oh, no. No.
Like, you mean being like vulnerable and like sharing, there's some kind of image, a lot of professionals, we seem to have that pressure of like, we have to have a perfect life, and our life has to be totally figured out. And it's funny, I get that too. People are like, oh, you teach a psychologist, teach meditation. Like, you're like, I'm, thinking I kind of glide through life, not getting upset about anything.
No,
And not don't get stressed, and I wake up calm at every moment.
you don't.
As much what? It's that's not reality. We all have ups and downs, but this journey, the courage you have to start a journey of like self-discovery, doing counseling work, then exploring mindfulness, that courage to actually be honest with ourselves. Like, we're not perfect, nobody is, but how can we discover and learn of our challenges? How can we improve how we are working with our own challenges so we can help others? And that's a journey you're on. That I feel the same. That's a journey I've been on. It's like, how can I be better at my own reactivity? How can I be better in, recovering from the ups and downs
through my work and through yeah. And that's kind of what happened, because when she asked me to do that, I was so hesitant, and I really had to delve deep and say, like, what, like, why this shame? Like what makes me such a lesser than periodontist because I have anxiety, but I'm managing it? Like, what about this? So I did a little bit of digging, a little bit of work on just what was stopping me from sharing my journey. And when I did, and that was about 7 years ago, 3-4 years before the pandemic, and so people were crying. Like, dentists who were listening to me were crying. And I could only tell you that 1 hour that I did the first presentation and shared my journey with vulnerability, it was like an out-of-body experience for me, because what I was seeing and how people were reacting back, because I can see all their faces. They can't, they're not seeing each other, but they're all looking at me, and I'm talking, and I'm seeing them, like, and I'm just like, oh my God, I wasn't alone. Like, that was my first moment that I'm like, do you guys understand? Like,
oh, you mean it's not just you? You're like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
You can relate?
Yeah. You guys can relate to my story. Like, I just thought it was like a case study. Like, I was just presenting, like, me, Sally, NF1, who went through this. No?
Yeah. And the one subject.
One subject in dentistry that had this experience. And I can tell you the things that people have shared with me during this journey of me, then that talk launching, like me getting phone calls and asked to come and talk about this to dental students, to our organizations, and to dentists around the world, like people like, please, like, we've heard you talk about this. And I felt like an imposter syndrome a little bit, because for a long time, I would like convince people that I wasn't the right person. I'd say, but I'm not certified in MBSR, but I'm not a psychologist, but I'm not a psychiatrist. Like, and so I had to get through that and say, I'm not, but I'm just sharing my journey and what I've learned. So it took a little bit of allowing myself, like, to actually do it and just, like, being okay to even speak on it, because I felt like I'm a periodontist. I have no business talking on this. Mm-hmm. And so it took some time to really give myself permission that it's okay. Like,
so glad you did, because really you going through your own experience, that really what qualifies you to talk about it. Like, you're not talking about it from theory. Like, you went through the anxiety, you went through the panic, you went through, like, wow, this is like leading to breakdown. And how do you work with it from the inside out? Yeah. That's how change happens.
I know. And so I guess the reason why they started listening also was the way that I got interested in this work was it was like the science, like this.
Mindfulness, you mean?
Yeah, like MBSR. Like, this has to be scientific for me to understand it. And And so when I started to present it like that, and I would talk about like kind of the science behind my, and I would put John Kabat-Zinn's work up about, responding to stress versus reacting to stress. And when I would say like people research this stuff, and there's science behind this work, and functional MRIs, and like what are the effects on the brain, and you rewire through neuroplasticity. These words are so sexy for dentists. Like when people hear these words, like they're like, how long does it take to rewire the brain? And I'm like,
like it's suddenly now legitimate. Like, wait a minute. If they've done a functional MRI and it shows something, this is real now. And that's amazing.
Yeah.
And for those who are not as familiar with MBSR, mindfulness-based stress reduction, it's really an 8-week program that's quite incredible in creating change, working with pain, illness, stress in life, really how thoughts, emotions impact our body. And if anyone is interested in MBSR, we do have free information sessions from our center, so you can check out the link below. Free sessions, learn about mindfulness, see if it's for you, and to give it a chance. But you gave it a chance.
I would highly recommend that. Everybody, there's nobody that cannot benefit from this. And I personally benefited so much. And just in my own personal day-to-day life, just how I was as a parent, how I was as a partner, how I was to me, like it. And I had heard like, compassion, like Kristen Neff does this work, and, like compassion to self first. And I was so nasty to me. Like, forget being nasty to others. If the Sally, the way I used to talk to myself before, the language I would use with myself, the belittling, the self-blaming, self-critical.
Man.
And I would even say perfectionism is in that group of being nasty to ourselves, like expecting that I should be a perfect person, which is what I was striving for in every aspect of my life, was me being nasty to myself. Like, I don't know where I got this idea that there was some need for me to be perfect.
So there's a cost. So what would you say the cost of what is the cost of perfectionism?
The cost of perfectionism for me, I think, was just never being, there never being enough. The never enough mentality for me was probably one of the biggest costs, because what happened is at every achievement I had, I would achieve it, and then I would, and then it wasn't enough. And then I would, so I graduate from university, honors, whatever. And it's like, whatever, top of my class, I get these awards, and it's like not even enjoying it for 2 minutes, and it's just past, and then on to the next thing. And then again, then it was like, I'm not enough as I am now. So Sally, you got to keep like next level, next thing. And once you become a dentist, then you're enough, that's good. Like you achieve that, you're good. And so I become a dentist, and then it's like, wow, it's not enough. Like what, like, oh my God, I did like 8 years of school, and now it's like, let's talk
I do more.
I could do more, and then go back to school. And it was like, and then I graduate from perio school, and I had both my kids during school. I was pregnant in first and second year with Ariana, my daughter, who's now 19. And then at the end of my program, I'm pregnant with Keon, my son, who's now 60. And it just wasn't enough. Like, even that wasn't enough. And then it was like, if I set up my practice, and then I'm successful, and I make money, and I have practice, and then I'll be enough. Then I'm going to be good. I'm going to be good. And it was when I had the panic attack, and then got the help, the help that I needed, I realized that it's never going to be enough. Like, I have to live with a part of me that will always have this little and I still live with her. She's around. So I'm just like you could do more, you know, give her enough. And it's like constant management. Now I don't shun her. I just bring her on board. And I'm like, oh, I hear you.
You're
like,
here. See, that's mindfulness, isn't it? I mean, mindfulness is recognizing what is the autopilot that's driving us. What is the autopilot? So you had an autopilot that was pushing you forward, this constant never enough, where to the point where it really led to this breakdown that you named. Yeah. And mindfulness, you seem to have recognized, wait, here she is again, and not hating that part of us, because it often these parts try to serve us, but they're not serving anymore. So we don't want to shame these aspects in ourselves, and that's what you were naming. You weren't shaming it. You were like, oh, she's here. Oh, we're not going there.
You know, like, what did you have to say? And then like finding like, why Sally? And then just being like, oh, okay, I understand where you're coming from, and you know, you're going to be okay. And so, you know, so there's been a few costs. I was probably never present. You know, like the cost of perfectionism. My mind was always preoccupied, and so, you know, I did miss, in hindsight, when I look back, you know, that's why I think this work is so important. It's never too late to do it. But when I look back, I think, oh, I wish I had that wisdom. And you know, when my kids were little, because they grew up fast. And when I was in my own striving for everything, I probably was present maybe half the time, or, you know, even less. Even less, not even half. And so it's the freedom to now recognize that, really just the freedom to recognize, and then to then remember what matters most, be able to calm everything else down.
See, that creates choice, right? Like you can choose to create a new way of being. And I want to actually read, you have an editorial that I really liked. Right, and you named this perfectionism. I just want to read a couple of things, and I think viewers would enjoy this, or listeners would enjoy this. So, so here it is, and I'll post it in the show notes.
Okay.
And so you say, I find that dentists are notorious for wanting to be perfect. Unfortunately, dentistry is a death sentence for those who want to be perfect. Like, that's really powerful. Like when we're so caught up, how you're naming, want to be perfect. And then the paragraph after, you name as a recovering perfectionist. I love that. You say, as a recovering perfectionist, I've seen how my own life, this idea of wanting to be perfect, has created a tons of angst and stress as I try to reach something that I can't even achieve. Right. I now advocate that good enough and I tried my best approach. Can you share a little more about that? Because I think listeners would benefit from this have to be perfect to just kind of...
You know, I taught at the school and I still teach there, but I was teaching more in the clinic initially after graduating. And I started to realize when I started to do this work that we really are using the words perfect. Like, who doesn't want a perfect dentist? Like, if you were to go and need it or filling or a root canal by someone, you kind of want a perfect dentist. Like, you want someone who does the perfect root canal. And so we were using this language, and we still do, by the way. And this idea that, and because our margin of error is so small, because the idea of being perfect is just so pervasive within our field, it just becomes a normal part of our education and the way that we think we should work. I realized that this probably started for me way earlier. You know, probably even before I went into dentistry, but as being an immigrant child and everything, but within dentistry, it was, you know, when you do a preparation, let's say of a tooth, first you start a mannequin, you're judged, your instructor and you are wearing loupes, like huge magnification, like, you know, 3.5 times magnification. So a small tooth is now becoming a big tooth, and you're analyzing things on a millimeter scale, and it's this idea of like I got to do this perfectly, and what I didn't realize is that that tendency was spilling into my whole life. Then everything was judged on a standard that I'd set in my own mind about what would be perfect. And I guess for everybody, it's different. They have their own sort of standards. But when I wrote that article, it ended up being very popular because so many dentists identify with the perfectionist tendency. And I guess no one had really named it. What's really sad for me is that conversation hasn't, that part of our education and what we're saying to students hasn't changed a whole lot. A profession that prides itself in perfectionism, in having it all together, and everything, both in the office and out, and we're judged to a standard that I think does spill into our lives. Like you will dentists being disciplined, not just for work, but it's also whatever other choices they make in their lives. And people will lose their license, reasons that, have nothing to do with dentistry and maybe could have been prevented. Like I have a colleague who lost his license because of addiction to narcotics. And it was from the same sort of stuff that was brewing, unawareness, not in their control, and just leading people to this desperate breakdown.
Yeah. So really the pressures of perfection, and you write about this as well, and it doesn't mean, okay, let's just be mediocre. Right? Because sometimes people confuse that. It's like, well, if I'm not going for perfect, I don't want to have an averaged up life or an average. But that's not what we're talking about. Like, I think there's a difference between perfectionism and excellence, right? Like going after excellence, it does allow room for failure, for mistakes, for readjustment, going, well, I didn't do that. How do I learn from this? Perfectionism has no room for that. It says it's all or nothing. I get it right or I failed.
Yes.
So how does mindfulness for you support in this, not being perfectionist?
Right, I know. It was a journey. It was a journey for sure. How it started initially was me really becoming very aware. So like that's one of the first things I learned in mindfulness is first just being aware, right? Aware of what is, because how can you change what you're not aware of is how I understood it. And I was on a retreat with Florence, and it was the first time I'd gone on a retreat, and they kept talking about this silent day we were going to have. And, this day of silence, the silent day. And I was like, what is the big deal? Like, why are they like this silent? It's such a big deal. Like, we're just going to be quiet. And then they prepping us for this silent day and, and talking about not engaging and this kind of demure eyes, kind of down and not being like, like eating, just kind of there. And I kind of listened to this stuff and probably, half listened. And I remember I'm, sitting in this room and listening, and they were like, well, it's going to start from tonight, and we're going to go, and then 24 hours. And so I go into this silence without really realizing the effect that it was going to have on me. Because I didn't realize what a social creature I am, and that I really needed the approval and the chat.
Seeing and looking
seeing, connecting with people. So there was no phones, no this, no that. And so I was going about my day, which wasn't too bad because it's the day, and I see other people walking, and I'm kind of looking, and then we go to eat, and I'm looking around, and then I go back to my room, and they had said, at night, again, no phones, nothing, just everybody goes. I go to my room at Omega, and Omega has these cabins, right? And it was an older cabin or whatever. So I go into my room, and I immediately see quite a large spider. Now, I'm not scared of spiders at all. I kill them, I take them out if I, can or whatever. I'm not scared of spiders. For some reason, I see this spider, and I'm like, oh my God. And so I break my silence, oh my God. And all of a sudden, I see like more spiders. And I'm like, oh my God, there's a spider infestation in my room. There probably wasn't. There were about 4 or 5 spiders. But I actually got a panic attack about the spiders. Long story, the grounds person comes in, they move me to another room because there are 4 or 5 spiders. So I break the silence, I talk, but it puts me in a really bad place where I'm crying, like, I'm not okay. I call my husband, I don't know if I should do this. I'm so upset, whatever. So the next morning, I've made my decision. I'm going to leave the retreat. So I come down and Florence is sitting on the Zafu and so I kind of go up and I'm like, and she's like, and she had told us if we're really in bad shape, and I'm like,
can I talk? Yeah.
So we go out and she's the kindest woman.
She is.
And I say, yeah, I think I'm going to leave. And she's like, leave where? And I'm like, at this process, like this whole retreat thing. And she's like, why? And I said, because I'm not cut out for this. Like, I can't do this. And everything. So thank goodness for Florence. She calms me down as only Florence could in that moment. And I actually ended up staying the whole week, which I'm so grateful for that I got to do that. But it really taught how unaware I was of everything going on with me. So how I tied that back into what you asked me is I brought that awareness into my practice. And so how do I use mindfulness? So the first step was, what are the procedures that fully trigger me? So awareness of it wasn't everything in dentistry that triggered me. Certain things did. So that procedure I told you does. Some other really big procedures, okay. Can I live not doing these? So initially the answer was no, because what kind of a periodontist are you if you don't do sinus lifts? I'm trained to do them. Everyone is doing them. And what? Sadly, Safa can't do them. So I processed to deal with all of that. And then
changing your practice. So it led to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it was how the next step was awareness of the effects that my anxious patients were having on me. It's amazing that I could help my patients, but it was not serving me. It was really confusing empathy and compassion. There's lots of people that talk about that. I'm not the right person to, but I started to understand that I could be very compassionate to my patients, still maintain a boundary where I didn't take in everything, but I was still a kind person, but I didn't have to really jump in there with all their stuff. So then I started to be selective, and maybe some patients actually would benefit from having sedation, both for them and me. If you're super highly anxious and it's offered and it's available, and to my surprise, actually many patients would prefer that. And it is the right way, and there's no judgment about it. And so started to really
that has ease.
Right?
Yeah, it's instead of it has to be a certain way,
right?
There is this kind of what's needed here, right? What's needed here for me to enjoy my practice and serve others. Really, that's what I'm hearing you say. It's so that's the adjustments. Yeah.
I bring it into practice. I practiced it with the staff. So something interesting I did as a pilot project was we would have mindfulness lunches. So what we would do is, it's not just me who's being affected by this stress. It's also my assistant. It's our receptionist. It's the whole office.
Ripples. Ripples. Yeah.
I started to share some of this work with them. So once a week, we would have lunch together. We would not answer the phones. We would all sit together. And I would just share one thing I had learned, in this journey. So whether it was let's breathe together, or something that we practice and seems to be very popular with dentists is a body scan. Yeah. So
which is a practice, a mindfulness meditation practice of scanning the body. Yeah.
Body. And just starting from, kind of going sequentially through. And then I start doing this with patients. So, patients would be highly anxious in the chair. And I would say okay, would you want to do this thing? We'll do it together and I'll do it with you. And so for the first 1 minute, just very quick, just like how you and I started today, and you and I breathe, which I found just set the
Yes, before we start recording, we just,
recording. I found like that was such a gift for me to just be able to breathe. And so I do that sometimes with the patients, and I say, let's just do a quick body scan. And I tell them that I give them permission to just relax their body in the dental chair, because most people are scared that the chair actually will give. So people are always very they're not very, so I'm like, you know what, just relax your whole body. The chair will support you. And just these little, they're not huge, but they're enough to just get people out of their brain for a second. If I tell you close or whatever, it just helps to ground me as well, just in those moments. So I try and bring it in, mindfulness, into the practice as much as I can, and it's really changed the way I view dentistry now. So it's been such a gift for me doing this.
See, that's transformation, is going through something, direct experience of deep pain and suffering, and choosing to work with it and sharing it with others. When you're speaking about the retreat and the spiders, actually, when you were describing, I can visually kind of imagine the place you're in, because I've actually taught there at the same location that you mentioned in Omega with Florence. I've taught with Florence. She's an amazing human being, and anyone's interested, I have a podcast with her from a couple of years ago. So they get to, it was one of my earlier ones. And I look back now, I'm like, wow, I used to start very serious in the podcast, and I was like, welcome to me. But anyway, it's out there.
You should do another one, yeah.
Yeah. It's exactly an updated one. But this willingness, I'm really I'm touched by your realness, vulnerability, and this really serves people. They know it's okay. We go through things, and it's actually human. That's what makes us human. We got to go through things, and how do we work with it? So I'm guessing for you, it's been worth developing. And that's another question I'm curious about is, people often ask, I'm too busy, whether it's a professional like a dentist or a counselor, or it's like, I'm too busy, or a student, or whatever work one is doing. Construction, doesn't matter. I'm too busy. I'm too tired. I don't have time to sit.
Yeah.
So what would you say to someone who thinks, I'm too busy for this?
Yeah. I tell dentists, you don't have time not to do this. Dentists pride themselves in being busy. There's almost this thing we also carry, that we're just so busy all the time. And the way I try to get around this, because this is one of the things that always comes up, is, number one, they kind of buy it from me because I'm doing the work, I'm still practicing. So they kind of get a little buy-in with the fact that doing a body scan, listening to a breathing exercise that's 1 minute. We're not talking about a meditation session of a half an hour every day. I mean, we're talking starting small.
Yeah.
And so, they come up to me and they're like, oh, what retreats did you take? Because I think I'll just go on a 1 week retreat, because I can do
fix everything.
Yeah, they do a 1 week retreat, but I can't do it every day. I'm like, don't do the 1 week retreat. No, because people do that, and then they're like,
sustainable.
Yeah. So I try and tell them, there's no way that you don't have. And so incorporating it into day to day, for me, with this group of dentists, the dental professionals that I speak to, seems to stick a little bit more than trying to bombard people with so many things that are needed. And I do try and tell them that just learning this one trick of pausing for a second and responding versus reacting, just that is mindfulness. just before you come home, taking that 1 minute with the hand on the door before you open the door and saying, I got a lot of stuff. I'm bringing a lot of stuff with me into this household. But is it fair to everybody that's just beyond these doors? And none of my worries are going to go away. People fear that if they don't think about their fears, that they're actually going to go away. I tried. They don't go away, right? They're always there. Like, you never forget your fears and your to-dos and everything. And so I just put my hand on the door, and it's just that physical touch of the hand on the door and just waiting before I go through the door to say, about this hour and a half or 2 hours with my family, and before the kids go to sleep or whatever. And I'm going to use every effort I can to keep coming back and saying, okay, you know what? I can get to my stuff in a minute, but I'm here. And so I think that using mindfulness incorporated into the day seems to work well for these individuals who always say they're too busy for anything else. So these bite-sized pieces of these mindful minutes, I say to them, why do you need to listen to the radio on the drive home? Because it's all bad news. And why not listen to a podcast like yours, or, put something on? You're going to hear something different, and you'll go into the house a little less triggered. So I think everybody has time to wake up and do a meditation, or do a meditation sometime during the day. But for people who are convinced that they're so busy, I think the way in is through these little bite-sized pieces. And so something that's very popular that I've heard a lot of dentists use is a body scan for themselves in the chair. So between patients, we always come back to our office and we do notes. And so what I always say is just as soon as you put your fingers on the keyboard, feel the back of your legs on the chair and just sink down for a second, just literally 5 seconds, and then get back to your work. So it's a way I find to get in to this space, because trying to convince them that they have time doesn't work. It's like,
That's
no, I don't have time. Don't have time. And then when I break it down into just like, do you have 1 minute? And then just gradually, because most of them want to pick up Kabat-Zitt's book, read it, and that they're now mindful. And I'm like, it doesn't go like that.
Doesn't, yeah. And you're referring to John Kabat-Zitt. He has, his classic book, Full Catastrophe Living, where he goes over all of that. And it's funny you say that, because I share this often with folks who are doing the 8-week mindfulness-based stress reduction program with me is, please put aside any reading material over the next 8 weeks.
I love that.
Right? Put aside 8 weeks, and let's go to the most important book, which is you, day to day, moment to moment. Let's read those chapters, and then after the 8-week program ends, then books can support us in understanding and highlighting what's happening with us. Because the danger becomes just reading conceptual, and it doesn't bring direct experience.
Yeah.
And as you and as you named it too, then we can sprinkle it throughout the whole day. A minute here, between patients or clients, or it could be while waiting at the bus, or before starting up the car, or before brushing teeth, when brushing teeth. So many little moments we can be there for.
Yeah.
Training the mind to be just present. It could be pleasant moment, it could be unpleasant, it could be neutral. We're helping the mind, this is my life right here, not that future, right here.
I know. Yes. And what a gift to tell people to put things aside and not read, because especially for dentists, I find, and anybody really in these in these high intense professions, they're so cerebral. Everything happens between our ears, and all problems are going to be solved here. And there's a complete disconnect to dropping. I remember the first time I did a body scan, actually freaking out that that I couldn't feel my toes. Like I was like, wait a second, do I have numbness in my, like, what? And it's just because I had never, ever in my life, up until going to, listening the first time to a body scan, thought that I could take all my attention to a different part of my body. If it wasn't in here, it didn't matter. And so that is such an important part of it, that the people who are so cerebral, who I'm sure is the people that you see all the time and work with, and it's just getting out of our head.
Yeah, I get it's in the way. Like it's such a powerful organ, brain.
Yeah.
Powerful, but can really kind of drives us to break down, can drives us to disconnect, and we forget we have a body sometimes. Where it's just
Yeah.
like,
No, I do.
oh,
Yeah.
like there's a rest of me, and somehow wisdom we associate with just conceptual.
Right.
But we all have a deeper wisdom that can rise, and when we have a little more space, we have a little more space to sit back, reflect, be with, contemplate, rather than the figuring out we're always in, right?
Always figuring it.
Yeah, yeah. This has been so enjoyable, and I'm sure listeners are wondering about that too. How can they find more about you and the work you're doing now? What's the best way for them to find you?
Oh, so sweet. I have a website, mindfuldentist.ca, and when I had started this website, it was during the pandemic. So I put up every day of the pandemic. I made a video, and then I ended up making 75 YouTube videos, which are 5 minutes or less. And it just kept me preoccupied. But I would just go and like put a video and make a video and post it. And then I realized that so many dentists were using it and watching these videos because they were also home. And then I'm a dentist and I'm home, and it was like we were feeling the same thing. So I would bring up points. So the website was to be something that I would always keep up to date, but unfortunately that hasn't happened. But it has my contact info, and I'm hoping that if I come across, if I just invest some of the time and effort in it, I'm hoping to keep it updated. I do talks, mostly to dentists and dental students, via Zoom, and mostly now, thankfully, in person, which is so much better. And I have an Instagram account, which is Mindful Sally. And I try to post on there little tidbits, like little videos. But again, guilty that I haven't done it for a year. But the site is still active, and I'm hoping to get back, to keeping it going. But the pandemic really changed things a bit. So
yes, of course. I'll put all of those in the show notes. And actually, it's so refreshing to hear from you. Like even that, like, you know what? Sometimes a social media account or sometimes a website, I just need to go back to it. And, that is so real, because that takes that pressure of like, things have to be perfect, and every minute, everything is polished. It's like, you know what? This is the best that you did, and you can reconnect with it.
Yes.
That's a way for people to reach you. So.
Yes. And it's freeing to give yourself permission to do that, because just the pressure of not wanting to disappoint the people who had subscribed to this Instagram account, and feeling like I had to do it, it then was draining. So I decided to step away from it and pick it up when I had renewed energy to want to do it, rather than feeling like I have to do it. More in line of serving that bigger idea of making sure that I'm kind to myself, making sure that I'm operating with what matters most. Is this really where my energy is right now, and am I forcing it? And is it just me pulling my hair out, going, what video should I put up now? Like, oh my God, like, and I don't want it to be that way. I don't want the energy behind it to be something that I have to do, because it also won't come out authentic. So I've been recently, I've been thinking about picking the Instagram videos back up, and my daughter says there's these Instagram stories you can do, and anyway, so I
Well, thank you for your realness, authenticity, and really courage to pave the way for so many as you continue working in your life as a professional, as a mother, as a specialist, as a human being, truly. So thank you. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I want to, yeah, absolutely. And I want to thank everyone for taking the time and listening. If you found this useful, feel free to share and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Thank you again, everyone. Look forward to sharing more of you in the future. May your moments be filled with ease and may be present in as many of them. Thank you.